Hey or hello YouTube. This is going to be a video on a number of things. Jordan Peterson is going to be in the video, but I'm keeping him for a little ways down because first of all, you save the best for last, and Jordan Peterson has become this absolutely incompetent kind of icon of this incompetence in absolute um I don't know, nature. How do you say the word? Pop-ups. As always, Jordan Peterson has become this icon of this bullshit and hypocrisy, incompetence, and this what a pseudo intellectual is. Um, but I'll save him for some time down the road. But he's back in the news with his bullshit, the same as always. Um, but I would like to continue on a little bit about genital modifications and ear modifications on girls. And I wanted to say that, of course, I made the video, and I want to end the piercing of baby girls. I've talked about that, and I would like to keep you maybe kind of up to date on topics around specific cases of this. Maybe as we get closer to our goal of eventually outlawing, or if not outlawing, at least being able to warn the public the way we should be able to warn them of the violence and the harm of various forms of child body modification, whether it be genital mutilation of male or female children, or for that matter, ear piercing, because people need to hear about that or hear about this and know that it can be very dangerous. Now, I will say, in order of importance, or if I had to kind of prioritize this, or if I had to put it in terms of priorities, and I don't think we should have to, but if I did, I will say that I do think, and I have said this before many times, I think that male genital mutilation, I probably even said it in that video, but male genital mutilation is quite a bit worse than an ear piercing for a number of reasons. And, plus I've just spent forever talking about this, and we've already outlawed female genital mutilation, so that should be the next thing to go is male genital mutilation, in my opinion. But ear piercing and genital mutilation should be outlawed probably at the same time. You could probably sign it all the way in one bill, but it should be looked at very similarly. With that being said, I don't think ear piercing is as bad as male genital mutilation, simply because a piercing does heal, and you're talking about ear piercing as opposed to actual modification or mutilation of the male infant's genitals or female or anyone else's. But still, I don't support ear piercing either, and I think that is a negative and a affront to civilization and what should be a modern, civilized, progressive world where people care about one another. And I don't support genital mutilation of anyone. And again, I think that if you look at that, and I'm going to probably have to go into this a little bit further into the video, but when I talk about Peterson's ass once again, but if you really look at the reasons we still do this, it was something that came about in mid 20th century, both to make profit and for religious bullshit. And it was primarily because of Christians like Harvey Kellogg trying to push genital mutilation to keep people from masturbating or having sex. That was the reason it was promoted. And also, it's for profit, and it's ego, because no one wants to admit that harm was done to their body, because they don't want to feel like anything's wrong with them, and they don't want to admit that they did anything wrong to their child, or that maybe they made a mistake while parenting. No one wants to ever admit that. So it's ego, and then it's greed, because for-profit and capitalist organizations and people keep promoting this shit through the media and through the news, and using this as a way of making money to promote this crap. So it's a combination of religious institutions promoting this shit and refusing to admit that maybe it's wrong, or they need to update themselves or change something, because they never do. It's ego, and that is people not wanting to admit they were wrong or could be wrong about something. And it's for-profit capitalist greed and capitalism, or what's wrong with, and that's why we still do that. And that's what's wrong with most of the country. The same thing that's wrong with circumcision is the same thing that's wrong with most of the country. And it really is symbolic, and I've said this before, for a lot of what's wrong with us and the country, not just that, but a lot of stuff. And it's almost a perfect symbolism or a symbolic representation of what's wrong with this nation. And it really represents everything else we do. But it's a ridiculous thing. Anyway, getting off that, because I've talked enough about that. And also, I just want to make clear that I am completely against ear piercing also. But I do think there's a bit of a differentiation between the two. I think that genital mutilation is worse, but they're both still very horrible. So moving forward. Tulsi Gabbard has been attacked as of recently by Hillary Clinton. And I mean, if you want any further proof that Democrats or that the Democratic Party and Democrats often manipulate other Democrats, including and probably especially feminists, just the same as the Republicans are constantly manipulating the right wing and manipulating conservatives, and they do that a lot, then you need to look no further than Hillary Clinton accusing now Tulsi Gabbard, a Democrat and her fellow female Democratic candidate, of working for the Russians. So now she's funded by Russians too. So anyone pretty much that is against our global war machine and stuff like that, like off. So pretty much, in short, anyone that's against the global war machine or our wars all over the world in the corporate industrial military complex, just like, you know, I'm against the corporate industrial military complex, prison complex, and the media complex, because you have all three. And they also control, I mean, you also have these rich people, these kind of 1% of the wealth controls everything, including the education system, the religions, and everything else. And they control the court systems. And you really, all right, you really need to look at people like Bill Hicks and George Carlin and talk about that scenario and talk about those issues and talk about that issue, because they really do have a monopoly over everything. And there's like a few TV networks that control all the news information you get to hear. I think even Carlin was talking about that once. And it's really hard to compete with them because, you know, it's hard to get any kind of motion or any kind of traction going. And if you can do that at all, it's probably not a bad thing. And that's the one thing I like about Alex Jones. Even though I find myself constantly at odds with a man or at odds with him, at least he has been able to get some traction going against these people. But there are people on the left that seem to have done very much the same thing or been just as successful. One guy I like is a guy called Secular Talk. I've talked about him before. And there's other people. There's a guy called Jimmy Dore, who him and Alex Jones don't get along, to say the least, and he's associated with Young Turks. And I'm not such a big fan of Young Turks for various reasons. I mean, I think they're a propaganda network and they're very establishment, but I have gone like Jimmy Dore over the years, and I wouldn't have felt that at the time, but I do. And I like Secular Talk. I can't think of the guy's name that runs it, but I like him and I like a number of them. Abby Martin came out once against circumcision. She interviewed a person about why it's wrong, and she talks about our foreign policy and different issues. She's on Russia Today, but of course you can't listen to them because they're funded by Russians. I mean, it's as opposed to our news that is funded by our government in China and Saudi Arabia, because you know that's way better. But Russia Today, I don't know if they're any good anymore. There used to be something called Democracy Now! So we have different ways of competing with the media, but not much. But that is one thing I will give conservatives like Alex Jones, to be able to do what he did and to be able to compete with the media at all the way he did, is very impressive. And I have to give him credit for that. And that was one example of them shutting him up. And that was just bullshit, you know, the way they did that. And I don't agree with that. And they're only getting worse. And I talked to you about how I was bullied by what at the time I thought were left-wing feminist trolls, but over the years or over the months, rather, I've begun to suspect they might have been right-wing people pretending to be feminists. I wouldn't doubt that. But anyways, either way, I was attacked by trolls. And of course, Schroeder being the very competent, logical people they were, managing their site so well and not at all being biased, went after and attacked me. Because go figure. Anyways, the point is, the media has their way of doing shit. And what was I talking about? Anyway, something about Tulsi Gabbard. The point is, she's being now accused of working for Russians, just like they accused Trump. And it's pretty much anyone that attacked or doesn't like Hillary Clinton is accused now of working for Russians, and you're being a Russian. And you almost have to think there's something going on there, like in the Democratic Party, or betraying, maybe it's Hillary and Trump, maybe it's Hillary and someone else, where they're just doing this to make themselves look stupid, or something's going on there, because there's no way in hell she thinks anyone's going to believe her. Anyone that would voting for Tulsi Gabbard believes what she's saying, or that we cured it. Fuck me. Yeah, just keep on. She's pretty. Okay. Anyways, the point is, there is just no fucking way that anyone would care what Hillary Clinton had to say about Tulsi Gabbard being funded by Russians, or believe that, or think that she was, or believe that she was, or believes her about that. And even if she was, knowing what we know now about our government, it's like, is one really any better than the other? They're both crooked as fuck, and none of them care about you. But I mean, the point is, she's now accusing and attacking Tulsi Gabbard, accusing her of being a Russian. They do this to everyone. It's such bullshit. You know, so I guess if they can't rig the primary against you like they did Sanders the last time, they would just accuse you of being a Russian. So either way, they screw you and they trick you and fuck you over, con you, and everything else. And they're this abusive, culturally manipulative people. They're manipulating the country, and they're taking us to hell in a handbasket. And if you don't agree with them, you're a fucking Russian or some kind of communist, or you're a Nazi, or you're a conspiracy theorist, or you're some kind of disloyal person. You're a lunatic. You're this. You're that. You're the other thing. But you're anything other than a fucking patriotic human being, as an independent person. Fuck me. But you're anything other than an independent-minded, patriotic human being that cares about your fucking country and other people's rights. No, you couldn't possibly be that because you disagree with these rich cocksuckers that run everything, these con artists. So moving on, hate laws. I need to move this forward, but hate laws in UK, they're now treating it more aggressively than they would other crimes, and I agree with that because I think when it comes to transgender people, because we already do obviously racially motivated crimes and in many cases religiously motivated crimes, I don't see why we can't extend the same rights to transgender people. And of course, I mean, they didn't say that it was a problem, but InfoWars is kind of acting like, oh well, this isn't right for some reason. And they also got it wrong because they said it was a hate crime defending people of a certain sexuality. It's actually a gender identification. It doesn't really matter. And it doesn't matter in this case because I support, or I would support both rather. But this is actually a gender identification or a gender identity issue. So it's gender and not sexuality. And again, gender is what's between your ears. Sexuality is what's between your legs. So really, it's all between your ears. But still, the point is, gender and sexuality is separate from one another, and you can argue there's some crossing or overlap of the two or between each other, but it's not the same thing. But the point is, I do think you should, especially if you have big problems with transgender oppression, as you do in many places, and transgender people being beaten up, lynched, killed, and treated badly or treated negatively, then those people should be protected. And if you have to try crimes against transgender people more aggressively, in the same way you have crimes against blacks in the South and in different parts of the country and different parts of the world in the past, then that's just what you have to do to protect transgender people and transgender rights. And the same for gay rights. We have to protect their rights and keep them from being discriminated against. That's only reasonable. Peterson, that fucker is back, and I just want to remind you, Peterson was a guy who is a hypocrite that was, of course, talking to everyone else about responsibility and maturity and how men need to be men. And he was also shit talking to feminists and talking shit to feminists. At the same time, he was a pillhead the entire time and whoring out an all-meat diet. But he was, of course, mutilating children's genitals, and he was doing that. But yeah, he was whoring out an all-meat diet and saying, if you want to be healthy like me, and of course, the right ring, and he was promoting the mutilating of genitals, by the way, not because for any health benefits or even cosmetic reasons or even religious reasons or any reason that might make sense that you might agree with it, but it's some kind of weird initiation process that even he admits is done to children. So it doesn't even make any sense because you're talking about infants. But he was doing this because it would torture the child, and he admitted that and talked about that. It's because he's a piece of shit. And then even Ben Shapiro going on to talk about, I'm committing you to something, and this is my sacrifice to make. Almost like woe is me, I'm torturing my child, so feel sorry for it. It's just the most bizarre psychology these motherfuckers have. But anyway, moving forward, he's now it was Antifa, and I actually agree with Antifa on this one because I don't like this fucker, and I'm just going to leave it there. But I think he should have a right to speech, even though he's a hypocrite. You'd have to be insane to listen to him. But I do think that he has a right to speech. And keep in mind, by the way, the right wing, who, for whatever reason, especially the males on the right wing, who are so just in a hurry to just accept anyone, no matter how full of shit they are, to listen to and to believe in, because they don't really have any real identity. And that goes for other people too, not just that one guy, but they will believe him. And of course, he turned out to be a hypocrite the entire time. So I think you're insane if you listen to the man, but I think he should have a right to speak, sure. But Antifa wants to close down certain churches that are, I guess, running his propaganda and bullshit about gay people, because he was also all for the traditional family. And you can't just say, nah, I hate LGBTQ people. Well, I guess it's more authentic and legitimate when he says it, because he got the label of a professor. What was he a professor of? I'm not sure. Maybe he was a professor of pseudo-intellectualism and wannabe religious, kind of religious bullshit. I'm not even sure what the guy was exactly, but I know he even admitted himself he doesn't believe religion. He just wants to believe in religion. He just wants to use that to control people. He said that himself. But fuck. 1 minute. But the cunt or the prick or whatever you want to call the man, he got the reputation of being. He looks like Jeremy Irons and he sounds kind of smart. You know, he's got that look and sound going. So he's a professor, and now he's going to sell you this bullshit. And it's the same right wing bullshit they've been selling forever, and it's just more fascism. And I agree with the Antifa fascists in this case. I agree with the Antifa or the anti-fascist in this case. He is a fascist. As for whether, but they're saying he supports eugenics for some reason. As to whether or not he supports eugenics, I do not know. But knowing what I do know about the man, I don't much doubt that. Or I'm sure he very well might, because, I mean, if you look at the rest of what he believes, he attacks LGBTQ people. He wants to mutilate children's genitals. He promotes religion just as a way of controlling people. He's a fucking hypocrite. He wants to be a fucking intellectual when he's not. He probably is a complete scumbag and douchebag. He's great at speaking. I'll give him that much. He is a good speaker. So I don't doubt for one fucking solitary second the damn man is probably a eugenics supporter as well, or a eugenicist as well, though I've not seen any real evidence of that. But I wouldn't doubt it. But still, I think the man should have a right to speak. And if you want to go listen to the fucking man talk, fine. Continue to whore yourself to someone that bullshitted you and sold you on an all meat diet, by the way, that while he was doing that, he was a pillhead and he was taking pills the entire time, and he's less mentally and or physically healthy probably than a lot of people that he was talking shit about. That you keep in mind he was talking shit about, but he was still more physically unhealthy than a lot of people. Notwithstanding mentally healthy. But what do you expect from a guy promoting the genital mutilation of children, or the mutilation of children's genitals? I would suspect the guy wasn't too fucking healthy, honestly. Microchipping, you want to talk about real religious issues that maybe I can get with the Christians on even, is microchipping now. That's becoming a problem. They want to be able to microchip the population so that if you disagree with them, they can turn off your microchip and throw you off the grid. That's where that's going. And genital mutilation, I'm sure, among many other things, is just another way of bringing that into being. Because if they can get you to do that, they can get you to do anything. Probably the same thing with piercing girls' ears. And the vaccinations, or the over-vaccination of children and everything else. And now everyone's okay with vaccinations, because one of your TV shows you like supports it, so I guess it's okay now. But the point is, vaccination and over-vaccination of children is a big problem, and they're supporting that. And it's just a big fucking problem. And that is something that Christians probably are right about, not insofar as all the crazy shit they believe, like, oh, well, Armageddon and Revelations, all that. I'm not talking about that, but that is something the government wants to do, and they talked about doing that for generations, going back decades, even centuries, and even centuries gaining that kind of control of the population. So that if you disagree with them, they can just throw you off the damn grid, and no one can speak out against them. And they've talked about that for centuries. That's a Brave New World, 1984. I mean, that's old shit, you know. And here's something I'm a little bit more agreeing with the conservatives on, though I don't agree with them on this either necessarily. But I do agree that there is a UK person now in UK, a transgender woman that was denied a porn job, a job in a specific porn movie, and she's filing discrimination lawsuits, and they're treating that as a hate crime. And I disagree, because that's part of what the porn industry is. That's there for people to work out what kind of fetish they want. But at the same, and that's where you hope the market works that out, because if you have enough fetishes and people that like different things, and enough people will watch enough different stuff, and everyone gets what they want, and enough actors and actresses will have enough roles in movies. But I have said before, that's a place where you hope the market works it out. But I will say there does need to be some into discrimination between people. And I have said before, anyone that would dump a girl just because she is transgender is not that much better than a girl that would dump a guy because he's not circumcised. I've talked about that. That's pretty disgusting. And it's the same thing if you would date a girl just because she used to be a guy or something. I think it's about the same. I wouldn't do that one way or the other way, and I feel that way. But so there does need to be some rules against discrimination in the porn industry and in everything else against transgender people or against anyone. But porn is still porn, and it's there for the person that wants to view it. If somebody doesn't want to see a transgender person, or a porn studio isn't producing that kind of film, then I don't think they should be made to do so. So, I mean, that's my opinion on that. Now, that doesn't apply to everything. Like Miss America, I think should have to earn transgender people. I support transgender rights, and I'm totally against discrimination of transgender people. But in some scenarios, I think discrimination is more okay than others. But I don't support that. But that's my opinion. And P666.